Welcome back, Bible students.
Oh, wow. I guess they are.
Yeah.
We're Bible students. They're Bible students.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're all Bible students.
We're all in Bible class together.
Bible class.
Bible class.
For this bonus episode of Drunk Bible Study, we wanted to explore some things from this week's episode, which was Numbers 28, 29, and 30. So I'll start us off here. And so I was trying to look up some more information about these sacrifices and like the numbers of these herds, or like, were these actual sustainable numbers?
Yeah.
And were these more than other people? And unfortunately, I had a hard time finding
Nobody knows.
any good answers to that. Basically, like in my searching though, I didn't seem to find anything that was comparing amounts of animal sacrifices in certain cultures to others, which is interesting. Although some of the articles did mention the fact that, like in Greek and Roman mythology, there's also a lot of animal sacrifice in that. But they're kind of making the argument that like it's different though, because those were
Different
usually,
how?
I guess that those sacrifices, like in the stories, tended to be more for a certain reason, to like appease a god or something, rather than being like a regular kind
thing,
of
I see.
established
Okay. Huh.
thing. They were a little more willy-nilly
A little
about
more
it.
Yeah.
reactionary,
I
perhaps.
guess so. Yeah, maybe. But what I did learn though is that something that one of these articles pointed out was, because they were talking about, they've got all these herds, right? Because they're doing these sacrifices. Why do the people keep complaining about being hungry? Like, why did they need
That's
this
a great
manna
question.
Well, that's
to
true.
live on?
Yeah.
Right?
We're dying, God.
Well, they did say they didn't like that light bread.
They didn't like the manna.
Well,
Yeah.
too bad.
Yeah. But so basically it isn't really explained in the Bible. I found this one article that gave a couple possible sort of theoretical answers.
Okay.
One, I don't buy as much, but maybe there's something to it. And this is kind of more about during Exodus, when they first left Egypt, saying that perhaps Egyptian culture had kind of rubbed off on them, in that eating like cows, for example, you wouldn't have done in Egypt because they were more worshipped than eaten. And so they're saying like maybe they kind of held on
Bulls.
to that, and so had a hard time with the idea of eating these animals. I don't know if I buy that
Yeah,
one.
I don't buy that.
But it was interesting. But then the other one was perhaps it's because this livestock is their source of income. And as shepherds, it's more like we've got to maintain these flocks.
Right, so we need the wool and the milk and
Right. But then it makes me wonder, though, if it actually could just be that, one, like, because they're having to sacrifice a lot of these, that they can't be eating them because they're doing this.
because only the priests get to eat them.
Right, because only the priests get to eat the portion of it that doesn't get burned up. I also learned about the tail of those fat-tailed sheep. You remember
Oh,
that?
yes, I do
Remember we were
remember
reading about that?
What about them?
That the tail of the fat-tailed sheep is considered the best part of it.
Oh.
So the fact that that part gets burned up entirely in the burnt offerings is significant, that they are kind of sacrificing the best part of this animal, like, when they're sacrificing it.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I guess other than that, I kind of looked up, I found this interesting article kind of about the animals in the Bible. And one thing that was interesting here is that cattle, specifically like bulls, were kind of seen as a status symbol. Like they were harder to come by. They were a little more rare. So like wealth wouldn't be measured by how many goats you have or how many sheep you have, but by how many cattle you have, how many
Really?
bulls you have.
Okay.
And it made me kind of wonder if the reason why there's been this like update is because the tribe's doing a little better now.
Yeah, maybe.
Like
People
that-
are richer.
Well,
That's a really good
years,
point.
yeah, years have gone by. They've conquered some people. Maybe
So
now
they're
they
like, you got to kill more cows.
They've probably stolen more cows. and
right from
sheep
the
and
people
stuff
that
now.
they've
Right.
conquered,
Yeah.
right?
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
good point.
So they've expanded their herds by conquering these lands.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, we got to update it now. Like now, you notice you can't just like
Now
sacrifice
you're, in
pigeons
a new, now
anymore.
you're in a new tax bracket.
Right. A new tax
Yeah.
bracket. That's a good
Yeah.
analogy. Yeah. And then I guess also just that this does point out that at the time they would have been making cheese and
Yes.
stuff like that from the milk. So it's also, there's food coming from them that doesn't just come from killing them.
Yeah.
So,
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, all right.
Also, apparently that sheep were so plentiful, as you can tell, we were sacrificing like 14 at a time here, that they were like pets also. And like, because they were just around, like every family had some sheep. And so they were like hanging out with the kids and like in your house and stuff like that.
What's the biblical evidence for that?
I think this is more of a historical
More of
evidence
a-
of like what was happening at
More of
that
an
time.
anthropological.
Yeah.
There were probably a lot of them. They were just hanging out.
There is a quote in Samuel that's mentioned that talks about the lamb drinking from your cup.
Oh, interesting.
Saying that that's a reference to the fact that they did like live in your house and would hang out with you.
That makes it even worse.
Yes,
honestly.
it does. Yes, it does. It's like killing Babe or Wilbur or any of them
Yeah.
in Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend that she was vegetarian and had been since she was a little kid because of that.
Because she had
Exactly.
a pet lamb.
Because she had a pet lamb. She grew up in, I forget which country, but somewhere in a Muslim country. And they had a pet lamb for a while that she like got really close to. And then it was being raised for this sacrifice
boy.
for a particular festival. And she was so traumatized
bet.
by this like day that she'd gotten so close to this lamb, and then it had led up to this day where they killed it in front of her, and she was just horrified.
Gosh.
Oh, my
and she
Lord.
never ate meat again after that. So
Wow.
I
So,
wouldn't
yeah.
goodness.
have either. Yep.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well,
What do you have?
I guess I'll talk about divorce. And okay, this is the thing. There is a lot in here about divorce in Deuteronomy where we're going to even delve further into it. So I don't want to spoil that for myself or the audience.
Is that
So I'm
where
going
all
to
the
kind of like,
divorce laws are?
yeah, I guess so. So I'm going to kind of work around that a little bit. But basically, like, the woman obviously seems a little vulnerable in terms of divorce because it seems like, there is the implication that men can just divorce women for any number of reasons, like whatever they want, basically. However, women had family and friends and even potentially children to back her up in certain instances.
Like if there's
So-
a legal dispute?
Yes, and also they might press for things like reconciliation rather than divorce. And so because like family means a lot, like this says like family means much more than it does now. And I'm like, whoa, okay, calm down.
Goodness.
Womeninthebible.net. But yeah. So there were a considerable
that
number of
website.
people in a family, more like a clan, in fact. So, okay, divorce is a matter of money because during a wedding, there will be like a large sum of money that is exchanged.
Okay, like as
Like a
A
dowry.
dowry.
when you get married. Sorry, not. I was
Correct.
thinking of the divorce. Okay, yes.
Yeah. So the husband might be able to use his wife's dowry and bride price throughout the marriage.
Yeah.
And so if he divorces his wife, he has to return both of these, which is fascinating. I didn't
Okay.
know that. So
Right.
that means that divorce might be more of a rarity in these instances. So
Yeah, because it would cost him quite a bit.
yes.
I suppose. I mean, depending on his dowry and his bride price or whatever it was.
Yeah. And this is very interesting. This says neighboring countries favored the husband less than Israel did. The Code of Hammurabi, which we've talked about,
Oh yeah.
allowed a woman to sue her husband for divorce. If she could convince the court that she was the wronged party, then she would be able to be granted a divorce. And as far as it is known, this was not the case in Israel, of course. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting to get comparisons to other cultures. That's always something I'm curious about. Like, how much is this just normal, and how much is this is unique to this tribe? You know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, so yeah, I mean, it is saying that a husband could make any number of complaints against his wife. A woman on the other end could not initiate divorce proceedings. If her husband did not want to divorce her and she wanted to leave the marriage, her only option was to make his life so miserable that he would be glad to leave.
Jeez.
I know. I was like, wow, womeninthebible.net. So, and then there's more regarding all this, but it's getting into Deuteronomy, which we're not that far off from. So I want to wait
we'll save
until we
that.
get there. Yeah, we'll save that. So anyways, that's a little bit about divorce.
What do you have for us?
Well, I was looking into women's vows.
Yeah. What kind of things were they
why
vowing
women
about?
be vowing?
Okay.
You're even some heavy sighs over there.
There's just a lot of speculation
yeah.
and gymnastics, as it were, like
Gymnastics?
mental gymnastics around
Okay.
how to square the extreme patriarchy.
Okay.
Essentially.
Are people trying to justify it, you mean?
Yeah,
Or-
people trying to
okay.
justify it or find a modern day interpretation that still feels good or
Okay.
not
Or
guilt
comparable, or-
inducing. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So what did I learn? First of all, so for some examples that people tossed out, a woman might vow to pledge a certain amount of money for charitable purposes.
Really?
Okay.
Yes, or
What-
to like
what-
give it to the poor.
What
Or-
money does a woman even have?
Well, okay, so
Quite frankly.
that's a common argument justifying this is that if a woman either belongs to her father or belongs to her husband, she's pledging money that doesn't belong to her. That's why he gets the right of refusal to veto it.
Okay.
However, it also applies to things like whether or not she vows to be a Nazirite or
Okay. So, I
you know,
guess.
so
okay.
it doesn't necessarily have to apply just to money.
Right.
You know, or vowing certain things to God, or so I got really deep down the rabbit hole of vows,
Classic.
basically.
Classic Dee Dee.
I know it is a very set formula kind of thing. If it's always like an if then statement of like, if God grant me this thing, then I will give to God such and such thing.
Now, is that actually, because I always assumed that was more of a modern sort of tit for tat sort of mentality.
Yeah, that's kind of like praying in general,
No, but
right?
we've already had examples
no.
of it.
Well, I don't know. I don't pray. I've never prayed.
At least,
Dear God, I will do this if you do that.
so what I was,
or
we've
is
already
praying
had
like-
multiple examples of it. Like Abraham did it, Jacob did it.
Oh,
well, what did they, do you remember the examples?
Well,
What were
I
they
read them
doing?
and then I was drinking whiskey, so no, I don't remember them specifically.
wait.
But things like, you know, if you
prayed?
grant me this land, or if you give me a son, or if you, and we're going to go on to read about more and more people who are making vows in that way.
Okay,
In this
interesting.
very clear if then statement. But so I think that's why it was very important that you had to follow through on it.
I see.
You know, so
I
if you were
see.
like,
okay.
God, if you grant me a son, then I will give him to the temple, for instance.
I see.
And then God grants you a son, you can't just be like, oh, okay, cool, and then not follow through on it. Like you
Right.
have to. So that's why there's a lot of language around like you cannot break a vow. You know, if you
well,
get the
if
goods,
you do, then what? You die.
that is probably disastrous.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess it wasn't, the
Yes.
consequences were not clearly laid out, but I
Yeah,
imagine they
but
were
just
bad.
that it's probably going to be bad for you.
They're probably inferred from like God's track record.
Right.
Right.
And so when you're trying to look specifically at like, okay, but if it's not just about economics, why is it that men are allowed to veto women's vows other than just patriarchy? And
I mean, yeah.
there's, you know, the usual song and dance bending over backwards of like, no, this wasn't meant to limit women. This was just meant to protect women
Ew.
in case they made a vow like rashly or in a bad
Well, what
circumstance.
about rash men
Well,
vows?
exactly.
Right.
That's what I'm like.
That's a
Well,
ridiculous argument.
who's guarding
Yeah.
the guards? You know, who's
No one. They don't
who's
need no
protecting the
garden.
men?
Right.
You
Because
know,
they're men and they know things.
yeah. So then I'm just like extreme eye roll. Like, yeah, okay, we have this extreme distrust of women, and
Right.
you know, think that they're emotional and rash and stuff like that. So, yes, but just that like if she wanted to make a vow and didn't want it to be negated, she would have to make it in privacy and in, you know, solitude where no one else was around to void it, basically.
Interesting.
Yes. And so essentially having to participate in some self-silencing to a certain extent also.
Well, you got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Yes.
It just seems like such an easy thing to do,
Uh-huh.
right?
Well, I think that the implication is that like you're always around your man and
It's
that you're always
true.
saying things out loud and that like he's always potentially going to be like, nah. You know?
I guess in my head, like vows with Yahweh are usually done like, in your head. You're just thinking them.
No, I think
rather than-
no, this is
You're
very
praying,
specific.
though.
You speak
You
it.
have to say it out loud.
You speak it out loud. Yes.
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
So you either like go into your one room in the house, which probably your husband is there, or he's out like sacrificing stuff.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the men are always they're just constantly sacrificing things.
Like a
I
freaking
mean,
factory out there.
They probably are.
Well, so okay, I found this really cute blog called Velveteen Rabbi,
that's
which is
adorable.
actually run by a rabbi who's a woman.
I
who
love
is
that.
writing about this chapter specifically, and it's really struggling with it. You know, kind of for the same reasons of
Yeah.
like I'm supposed to teach this on Sabbath, but how do I square this with my modern sensibilities?
Good question.
And essentially what she came up with was kind of taking the gender out of it and making it more about like, if you are in charge of someone more vulnerable and you're caring for them, you're responsible for making sure that they don't get themselves into trouble.
That's like a person with a child.
Yeah, exactly.
But presumably this isn't like your wife isn't your kid.
Right. Well, so that was kind of her message that she took from it, is like, if we take the whole like husband, wife, father, daughter dynamic out of it, and just that anyone you're caring for, you can take responsibility also for them not being led astray, essentially.
Okay.
I guess
I
in
mean,
their
that
commitments or
seems-
whatever.
Yeah.
I know it is what it is.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah, I get it.
All right. Well,
Cool. You got anything fun to end this episode with, or is this one just going to be a
Fun.
downer?
it's not a downer. It just is. It's
I thought
just
Velveteen
the
Rabbi was
Bible.
pretty fun.
I mean, the name is great. I agree.
Yeah, I like that very much because, you know, she's sweet and
And
the
soft.
rabbi is trying to like figure out the Bible and the Torah.
Yeah.
And that she managed to live even though she had to be burned.
What?
The Velveteen Rabbit.
Oh, right. That is how that story ends. We were trying
That's how
to
the
end
story
things on a
starts.
fun note.
No, it starts that way.
How does it start?
The little kid is sick with like measles or
they have to burn all the
something. They have to burn
toys.
all the toys after they get better.
Right.
But the Velveteen Rabbit, who is the most loved toy, ends up escaping and like becomes a real
cry.
rabbit. No, like it
No, I
becomes a
remember
real
now. I
rabbit
haven't
and then
read
comes
that.
back, as a real rabbit, and the kid sees it and it's like it's a real rabbit now.
I haven't read that story in years.
Oh, anyway.
Well, now we're going to cry. So
And Emily's already crying. I'm sorry. That's the story. That's the name.
let's end things. Let's just end it here.
Just call it now. All right. Well, see y'all next week.
What? That's so sad.